The sun had barely risen over the small coastal town of Bohol, and the smell of saltwater filled the air. Miguel, a thin boy with bright, earnest eyes, knelt beside his father's workbench, sanding a splintered plank from an old fishing boat. His father, a quiet carpenter with rough, calloused hands, worked steadily, his hammer taps echoing against the waves. Miguel had grown up in this workshop, the scent of wood and varnish as familiar to him as the sound of his father's voice. Every day after school, he would help fix boats, mend chairs, and sweep sawdust from the floor. But there was one thing that made him different from the other boys in town. When he worked, he sang. Softly at first, then with more courage, his voice would rise over the crash of the waves. One rainy afternoon, as water dripped from the shop's tin roof, Miguel sang a song his mother used to hum. A tourist passing by paused under an umbrella, enchanted by the boy's voice. Without Miguel knowing, the man pulled out his phone and recorded him. The video traveled faster than the tides, from one phone to another, until it reached a talent scout in the United States. Days later, Miguel's father received an email inviting his son to audition for America's Got Talent. But excitement turned quickly to worry. The trip to America cost more than his father earned in a year. They almost gave up, until their neighbors stepped in. The fishermen donated a day's catch, the schoolchildren emptied their coin jars, and even the street vendors brought food to sell for Miguel's ticket. As the community gathered in the rain to hand him an envelope of cash, Miguel realized, he wasn't just singing for himself anymore. He was carrying the hopes of an entire town. The bright lights of Los Angeles felt like another world compared to the quiet shores of Bohol. Miguel stood backstage at America's Got Talent, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it over the roar of the crowd. It had been 3 long years since he last stood on this stage. Back then, he had been just a nervous boy with bare feet and trembling hands, and his journey had ended far too soon. But this time was different. This time, he carried the memory of his mother, who had passed away the year before, and the strength of his father's love. Around his neck hung his mother's old rosary, its worn beads warmed by his skin. When the stage manager called his name, Miguel stepped into the spotlight. The judges' faces lit with recognition. Simon leaned forward. "Miguel, you're back." "Yes, sir," Miguel said, his voice steady but soft. "Last time, I sang for a dream. Today, I sing for love." He strummed his guitar and began a medley, half in English, half in Tagalog. His voice had matured, carrying a depth that made the arena go silent. Every note seemed to hold a story. Of long nights in his father's workshop, of the smell of sawdust and the sound of waves outside their door, of a boy who had learned that music could be both a prayer and a promise. By the time the last chord faded, the audience was on its feet. Simon's eyes glistened as he whispered, "That was beautiful." Miguel bowed, clutching the rosary. In that moment, he wasn't just a poor carpenter's son, he was an artist, standing in the place where his voice belonged. The cameras cut to Miguel's trembling hands as he adjusted the strap of his weathered guitar. The audience waited, but Miguel didn't start playing right away. Instead, he spoke, not to the judges, but to the world watching. "My father is a carpenter," he began, his voice gentle yet unwavering. "When I was little, I thought his hands could build anything. But I didn't realize, they were also building me." On the giant screen behind him, black and white images appeared. His father bent over a workbench late at night, sawdust clinging to his shirt, the glow of a single bulb lighting the room. The camera lingered on those hands, cracked, scarred, but steady, shaping wood into something beautiful. Miguel's eyes glistened. He built chairs, tables, and boats, but he also built my dreams. He worked extra hours, skipped meals, so I could take guitar lessons. He strummed the first chord of an original song, My Father's Hands. The melody was soft, almost like a lullaby, but each lyric painted vivid pictures: a boy watching his father from the corner of a dusty workshop, the smell of varnish in the air, the way calloused fingers would gently ruffle his hair after a long day. The crowd swayed as Miguel's voice rose, tender yet powerful. The final line, "And if my voice can reach the world, it's because his hands held me first," landed like a quiet thunderclap. The arena erupted in applause. Heidi covered her mouth, Terry Crews wiped his eyes, and Miguel's father, watching from a small television in their shop back home, leaned closer, his lips trembling. In that song, every splinter, every blister, every nail his father had hammered became something more, a bridge carrying Miguel to this very moment. The air in the theater felt charged, like everyone was holding their breath at once. Miguel had just begun the second verse of his performance when Simon suddenly lifted his hand. The music stopped. The crowd murmured, confused. Miguel froze, gripping his guitar, unsure if he had made a mistake. Simon leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "Miguel, sing it again. But this time, don't think about the cameras. Don't think about us. Sing it, for your father." The request hit him like a wave. Miguel closed his eyes, took a shaky breath, and started over. But this time, the sound was different. His voice trembled at first, then grew, richer, rawer, more alive. It was no longer a performance, it was a confession, a thank you, a son's love poured into every note. Tears rolled down his cheeks as he reached the chorus. His guitar strings seemed to hum with his heartbeat. The crowd, once restless, was now silent, except for the sound of sniffles and muffled sobs. And then Simon pressed the golden buzzer. The explosion of gold confetti lit the stage like a sudden sunrise. Miguel dropped to his knees, overwhelmed, his hands covering his face. The judges stood, clapping through their own tears. Terry Crews ran out to hug him, whispering, "Your father's going to be so proud." Back home, in a dimly lit workshop in Bohol, Miguel's father sat in front of the old TV. As the confetti fell on his son thousands of miles away, his own tears fell silently onto the wood he had been carving. For the first time, Miguel's dream wasn't just his, it belonged to both of them. And now, the whole world knew it. The night of the finals arrived, and the world was watching. Miguel stood center stage, dressed simply, a white shirt, dark trousers, and his mother's rosary around his neck. In his hands, the same old guitar his father had saved for years to buy. The lights dimmed. A single spotlight fell on him, and the first note echoed through the theater. His song tonight was not just for the judges, nor the crowd, nor even for the millions watching at home. It was for one man, sitting halfway across the world, in a small wooden workshop that smelled of varnish and sea air. As Miguel sang, a split screen appeared on the broadcast. On one side, the grand AGT stage, golden lights dancing over the audience. On the other, his father in Bohol, hunched over a tiny TV, the glow reflecting in his tired eyes. He sat on a wooden stool he had built himself, hands clasped, not moving except to wipe away a tear. The final verse carried a message that crossed oceans: "You gave me roots, you gave me wings. And in every song, I hear your voice." When the last chord faded, the crowd erupted into a standing ovation. The judges' eyes were wet, and even Simon, known for his stoicism, clapped slowly, his smile genuine. A few hours later, the votes were announced. Miguel had won. The theater exploded with cheers, but Miguel didn't look at the trophy in his hands. He looked straight into the camera and whispered, "This is for you, Papa." Back in the workshop, his father pressed his rough, calloused hands against his face and wept. The boy who once sang in the rain was now a man singing to the world, and he had carried his father's love every step of the way.